One of the leads on the Pillars project. I've been a member of our community for a really long time. Somebody who, mashallah, I think has so many of the qualities and characteristics of what we need for a leader of a project like this. So if you can join me in welcoming Nabah Ikram to the stage. She's going to share a little bit about herself and the project.
So I've probably given several versions of this speech in my head over the past 2 years. I know what you're thinking. It took them 2 years to produce season 8 of Game of Thrones, and that arguably sucked. Hopefully this speech won't. 2 Ramadans ago is when Pillars of Peace was incepted, born on the 4th floor prayer room of the IC. A wonderful incubator, mashallah. There were several factors that helped determine what I was going to say today. First of all, I wanted to know when Imam Khalid was going to speak because no one wants to follow that lead. Let's all give him a round of applause. Second, I was really conscious that many people would either be in their last hours of the fast or just opening their fast, and this can be a very heavy topic. So I just wanted to let you know that if you need some self-care items, we have some crayons and coloring sheets at the table and some grounding exercises to ground yourself. And I encourage you to speak with someone you feel comfortable with or come find me. So I'm a pretty private person, and so another factor for me was how vulnerable did I want to be in front of a room full of people I'm likely to see pretty often. So I thought about it, and I'm still thinking about it. I feel that God wanted me to use my voice to be an advocate. All the experiences in my life are what led me up to this moment, standing in front of you here today. A little background on me. I was born and raised by 2 loving parents in Illinois, where I lived for the first 12 years of my life. My dad was a Sunday school principal actually, yeah. And we were super integrated in the Muslim community. Our family then moved to Pakistan, where I lived and went to school and studied law. From a very young age, I witnessed social injustices, inequalities. I look outside my car window and see famine, poverty, child abuse, and violence against women. My mom was a social worker, and my sisters and I started volunteering in an orphanage, packaging medications for remote villages, and helping internally displaced people. I started volunteering at a domestic violence program and have been working in the gender justice field for the past decade. I worked on cases of femicide, honor killing, and acid violence. I managed a domestic violence program in New York City for 2.5 years, working with survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, marital rape, trafficking, and forced marriage. Right when I think I've seen it all, I'm wrong. I have seen even the most accomplished women stripped of their confidence and self-esteem. Those subjected to physical abuse have blatant telltale signs, while others have deep-rooted scars which are not visible to the eyes. I've had mothers and fathers calling me from abroad to take care of their daughters who moved to the US after getting married. वो हमारी घर की रानी थी, हमने उसको इतने प्यार से पाला. She was the light of our home, well, she was a princess of our home, and we raised her with so much love. घर की रोशनी थी वो. She was the light of our home. A few years ago, I served on a series of roundtables initiated by New York City's First Lady, Shirlane McCrae, to talk about domestic violence in faith-based communities. It was apparent that there was a severe lack in linguistic and culturally specific services for Muslim survivors. Generally speaking, we can all agree that there's a housing crisis in New York with lack of affordable housing and soaring rent prices. And when you combine the vulnerability of being a survivor and other intersecting identities with homelessness, we're talking about a very complex issue. 2 years ago, Karim and I spoke to Imam Khalid, recognizing the gap in residential services for Muslim survivors of domestic violence, and we wanted to help open a shelter. We visited existing shelters, zoned property, and spoke with people locally and nationally running domestic violence programs. What moved me the most are the survivors who we spoke with, who shared their experience with us in confidence, and continue to shape what Pillars is today. The stories and experiences we're hearing about tonight have become too common, yet very often unheard. We tend to other the issue and don't think it's going to happen to us or the people we love. What I'd like you to take back tonight is that abuse transcends all qualifications, socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, and religion. There are no barriers, no boundaries. I plead everyone tonight to make a pledge to be an active participant in the end of gender-based violence. Jazakallah. Now I'm going to invite up Karim Ahmed, and we're going to give a little presentation about Pillars of Peace.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Karim Ahmed. I'm the third co-founder of Pillars of Peace. In the winter of 2016, I saw the Islamic Center asking for volunteers to help develop some capital projects. And I was excited because I'm an architect, and I was excited at the prospect of working on a civic project organized by Muslims. Keep in mind, this is winter of 2016, and the context was a very recent victory of a presidential candidate who bragged about committing sexual assault and who openly demonized Muslims. I spoke to Nabah a few times about this project through the winter and spring of 2017 before we approached Imam Khalid about it, and we all got started. After Imam Khalid made his first announcement about this endeavor at Jummah prayers, I noticed something. People who knew me already or who met me shortly thereafter started opening up to me in a way that I didn't expect. I distinctly remember the first time I met a sister, and after she realized that I was the Karim that Khalid mentioned working on this project, she looked me straight in the eyes and told me, "I'm a survivor." I was amazed at how frank these exchanges were, and I started to come to terms with the research I had been doing with Nabah already. The fact that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner violence. And this was even before the Me Too movement started. After that, the conversations were even more open, more frank. And it occurred to me that we might be the right people in the right place at the right time. And this was an opportunity for us as Muslims to create something in a different paradigm than other organizations who offer these services were founded and operated in.
So before we share a little bit more about the project, we really want to give a shout out to our team who have been absolutely wonderful and have dedicated so much of their time and commitment and compassion to this project. So if you could all please stand. Khalid Hassan, I see you at the back. Shamim Hussein, Salma Ikram, Hannah Unver. Thank you all so much for being part of this project. Nida Basi, I don't know, I can't see you. Are you here?
She's over there.
Okay, sorry, Nida. We also want to give a shout out to our longtime supporters, Dana and Andre, who've had our backs from the beginning, our legal advisor, Adabel, and Nazir also for his support through this process. Also want to thank everyone who has been baking goods, buying sweatshirts, and the community that's come together to support this cause. We cannot do it without this community. And thank you all, everyone, who are here today participating and listening.
We have our mission up here on the screens, but we want to stress that our ultimate vision for this project is a more complete set of resources to address issues related to domestic and gender-based violence. We intend to open a series of residential facilities to provide emergency shelter, safe houses, transitional housing, and supportive housing that will be supplemented by the educational and training programs to end cycles of violence. All our initiatives aim to encourage more care, knowledge, and resources for survivors of domestic violence, in addition to fostering long-term sustainable support systems. And to that end, we want to show you Noura House, our first capital project. Inshallah, the Noura House will be a confidential emergency domestic violence shelter. Noura is the feminine conjugation of light in Arabic. Light is symbolically used in Islam not only as a contrast for dark times and situations, but also more broadly as a metaphor for the illumination of God and a means of guidance. We imagine the Noura House being a means of refuge from dark circumstances and a shelter where individuals can begin again on a brighter path. As an emergency shelter, it will likely be the first place a survivor will stay in immediately after leaving some pretty terrible circumstances. Stays will vary from 1 to 3 months depending on the complications or circumstances that will vary on a person-by-person basis, depending on factors like how receptive their family is to dealing with this reality, that individual's employment and financial situations, and their immigration status. Survivors will begin with a referral to Pillars for Peace, and once a staff member takes them to the shelter, there'll be a thorough intake process that will lead to a caseworker developing a strategy for their specific case. Residents who have a supportive nuclear family and a home they can go back to may need only a month in the shelter to have access to resources to start the healing process before returning to their family. Residents who have stable finance or immigration work status may need a little longer, but may be able to arrange an independent living situation. And most dependent is probably people who have an unsecure immigration and or financial situation who will probably need a longer period of time to relocate to a transitional house. We've been spending the last 2 years, as Nabah mentioned, researching all the requirements to develop this project. OCFS, the New York State Department of Health, New York City Building Code and Zoning. We spent the last summer looking at properties that are of a comparable size and capacity to provide the services we're talking about. This is a diagram of the types of features we'll be creating in the shelter. Based on our market research, we found properties starting around the $600,000 range that have enough space and the correct zoning to accommodate these functions. And we'll need about $100,000 to do necessary improvements to optimize the space and build out the shelter-specific functions. There be the basic living functions you expect in any home: sleeping and bathing.
So I just wanted to add that I've met with survivors who've had terrible experiences at shelters in New York, dealing with staff that's not culturally aware, racist, and it's like a general animosity in the air. So having to explain that they're doing fajr in the middle of the night and people think they're doing yoga, just imagine leaving, it's happened. And just imagine that you're leaving your house and the only thing dear to you have left is your prayer and not being able to practice.
There'll be cooking and dining areas where we'll provide food that is healthy and halal.
Again, I know some of the things that I've heard about shelters over here, and I've had survivors come and tell me that they've requested a separate pan to cook halal food separate from pork and just being denied those rights. So I think just really creating those spaces where we can cater to these needs is really important.
And then we'll have areas that are specific to a shelter facility, an office for staff where they can have one-on-one conversations with residents and help them through their caseworking. And a space for job training, life skills, and legal training. Nearly 40% of the population of New York City is foreign-born. According to the Mayor's Office on Domestic Violence, young foreign-born women are more likely than any other group of women to be killed by their abusers. Just educating people on their rights as people living in this country and teaching them other life skills so that they can help get back on their feet. And finally, we have elements that aren't really rooms, but are considerations we made for that final layer of dignity and cultural sensitivity to the needs of the Muslim community that we believe anyone, regardless of practice, can appreciate. These small features are things we often take for granted in our own homes, and they literally start from when we enter through the front door. Simple things like a place to take off your shoes. If you can imagine the anxiety that your mother gets the first time you bring home an American friend who doesn't know to do that when they come in. Think about leaving a house that is not a home, only to come to a new place that poses adversity from the first few steps. We mentioned halal dining earlier, and we're conscious to organize living areas so that there's a prayer space large enough to accommodate everyone staying in the shelter.
So this is a familiar, comfortable space, where we have group therapy sessions and other programming services. Really thinking holistically about services, taking into consideration safety, health, mental and emotional well-being, and economic empowerment. So many of the survivors we're working with, this is their first time being away from their home. And we're conscious of the intersecting identities of being a survivor, being an immigrant, being undocumented, being Black or a person of color, and the layers of systemic abuse that already exist. So that's why our guiding pillars for Pillars of Peace are dignity and equality, solidarity and inclusivity, community engagement and empowerment, social justice, and faith. When thinking about what kind of space we wanted the shelter to be, we were conscious of the circumstances that many of its residents were coming from. And when we started to think about that, we wanted this place to be the exact opposite. So instead of demeaning, dignified. instead of unsettling, peaceful, and instead of dark, bright. So we want to thank you all for your attention and listening to us. I want to remind you that this isn't our project. This is our project. So when someone asks you what Pillars of Peace is or what Noura House is, you tell them that you're a founding member and that this community stands against domestic violence. Thank you so much.